The war had no beginning that anyone could remember. It simply was, like the stars themselves, like the darkness between them. For 10,000 years the galaxy burned. The Castheric Dominion controlled the eastern spiral arms. Their ships moved like insects through the void, thousands of vessels acting as one mind. The Castheric were not individuals. They were a hive, billions of bodies sharing one terrible consciousness. Hive Queen Zaxthar sat at the center of this vast network, ancient beyond measure, her thoughts rippling through her children across 1,000 worlds. In the western reaches, the Vryn collective shimmered and pulsed. They were beings of pure energy, their forms shifting between matter and light. They saw the universe differently than solid creatures. To them, reality itself was something that could be shaped and molded. Their leader, if such a word applied to beings without fixed form, was luminary essence of void. It believed the war was destiny, a cosmic struggle between order and chaos. Between these two giants lay the neutral zone. Here, 47 different species tried to survive. They were the forgotten ones, the small civilizations caught between monsters. Their worlds became battlefields. Their children grew up knowing only the flash of weapons fire in the sky. Ambassador Thelen had seen it all. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived people. His 4 arms hung heavy with exhaustion as he stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. His skin, which should have been bright blue, had faded to a dull gray. Too many years, too many failed peace talks, too many memorials for destroyed worlds. The Council met on Concordia Prime, a massive station floating in neutral space. It was supposed to be sacred ground, a place where weapons were forbidden, but even here the war cast its shadow. Every delegate looked tired. Every species represented had lost something to the conflict. Thelen prepared to speak. It was the same speech he had given 100 times before. Appeal to reason, beg for mercy, ask the impossible question of how to stop a war that had become more than a war. It had become the entire purpose of 2 civilizations. But before he could begin, alarms rang through the station. Not battle alarms. These were different. Discovery alarms. A young technician, her scales still bright with youth, rushed into the chamber. She should not have been there. Protocol demanded proper channels, proper procedures, but she was too excited, too frightened, too amazed to care. Ambassadors, she gasped. We have detected a new species. They have achieved faster than light travel. They are broadcasting messages. They call themselves humans. They come from a world called Earth. The chamber erupted. New species were rare. Spacefaring species were rarer still. A civilization capable of FTL travel meant new resources, new warriors, new territory to fight over. Within hours, both empires had dispatched their fastest scouts. The coordinates were in an unexplored arm of the galaxy, far from the war zones. A small yellow star with a blue-green planet third from its sun. Long-range scans showed cities, satellites, primitive nuclear weapons. The humans were young, incredibly young by galactic standards. Hive Queen Zaxthar studied the data flowing into her consciousness. These humans were weak. No natural armor, no poison, no telepathy. They died easily from temperature, radiation, and simple chemicals. Their military technology was laughable. A single Castheric warship could reduce their entire planet to ash. But they had something the Castheric lacked: individuality. Each human was separate, making their own choices. This made them unpredictable. Chaos agents in a universe of order. They could be useful. They could be shaped. They could be made into weapons. Luminary essence of void reached a similar conclusion. The humans were soft, but their minds were strange. They formed attachments to things that did not matter. They valued concepts like love, friendship, honor. They created art for no practical reason. They told each other stories. This was alien to the Vryn, but potentially valuable. Emotional beings could be manipulated through those emotions. The Galactic Council watched with growing dread. Another species about to be pulled into the meat grinder. Another civilization that would learn the bitter taste of endless war. Thelen felt older than ever. Then the human delegation arrived at Concordia Prime. Their ship was small, almost comically so compared to the massive vessels that usually docked at the station. It had no weapons, or at least none that the sensors could detect. The hull was marked with symbols and flags from different human nations. Already they advertised their divided nature. Captain Sarah Chen stepped off the ship and into galactic history. She was not particularly tall or strong by human standards, let alone compared to the towering beings that filled Concordia Prime. Her uniform was simple, military in cut but bearing peaceful insignias. Behind her came a diverse group of humans, different colors and sizes, male and female, young and old. The other species stared. Some with hunger, some with pity, all with curiosity. These soft creatures were either brave or stupid to come here, to the heart of a galaxy at war. Theln met them in the grand reception hall. He tried to smile, though his face was not made for it. "Welcome to Concordia Prime," he said in the trade language, translated instantly by their devices. "I am Ambassador Theln. I represent the Galactic Council of Neutral Species. I must warn you, you have entered a dangerous place. Our galaxy is at war." Chen nodded slowly. "We know. We have been listening to your broadcast for months as we approached. We have seen the destruction. We have counted the dead worlds." She paused. "We came anyway." "Then you are fools," a harsh voice cut through the hall. A Castheric warrior form scuttled forward, its many legs clicking on the floor. "You should have stayed hidden. Now you will be consumed. The Dominion will absorb your species. You will become part of the hive. You will serve the war effort." Before Chen could respond, a shimmer of light coalesced nearby. A Vryn emissary took partial form. "The collective offers a better path. Join us willingly. Ascend beyond flesh. Become one with the cosmic energy. Fight for the righteous cause." Chen looked at both of them. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not cruelly, but with genuine confusion. "You want us to join your war? A war we just learned about? A war we have no stake in?" "You have no choice," the Castheric hissed. "There is always a choice," Chen replied. Then she turned to face the assembled delegates of the council. "I have a question for everyone here. Why are you fighting?" Silence fell like a hammer. In 10,000 years, through countless peace talks and negotiations, no one had asked this simple question. The Castheric warrior form clicked its mandibles. "Because the Vryn are a threat to order," the Vryn emissary pulsed. "Because the Castheric are an abomination against cosmic harmony." "But why?" Chen pressed. "What started this? What are you fighting for?" Neither could answer. The war had simply always been. Its origins were lost to time, buried under millennia of hatred and death. They fought because they fought. They killed because they had always killed. Chen let the silence stretch. Then she spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "On Earth we have fought many wars. We have killed each other over land, resources, ideas, religions. We have done terrible things," she paused. "But we have also learned to stop, to make peace, to choose differently." "Impossible," the Vryn emissary said. "Is it?" Chen asked. "Then let us try. Let humanity mediate your peace talks. We have no stake in this war. We have nothing to gain from either side winning. Let us help you find a way to stop." The chamber exploded with noise. Some species laughed. Others shouted in outrage. The idea was absurd. Peace had been attempted 1,000 times. What could these newcomers possibly accomplish? But Theln looked at Captain Chen and saw something he had not seen in decades. Hope. Not the desperate hope of the dying, but the simple, stubborn hope of someone who had not yet learned that some things were impossible. He raised one of his forearms for silence. "The council will consider your offer," he said formally. Then more quietly he added, "Though I fear you do not understand what you are attempting." Chen smiled. "Perhaps that is exactly what you need. Someone who does not yet know that peace is impossible." As the meeting adjourned, Theln watched the humans leave. They walked with confidence, unaware of the enormity of the task they had volunteered for. The galaxy had tried everything to end this war. Diplomacy, threats, sanctions, isolation. Nothing had worked. What could humanity possibly do that had not been tried before? What made them think they were special? In the depths of space, Hive Queen Zaxthar felt the stirring of something unfamiliar. Curiosity. These humans were strange. They refused both empires. They asked questions no one asked. They smiled in the face of threats. Perhaps they would be interesting before they were destroyed. Luminary Essence of Void contemplated the same conclusion. The humans were a curiosity. Their emotional chaos might provide insight into the enemy. They would fail, of course. But the manner of their failure might be instructive. Neither empire understood what they were dealing with. Neither could have predicted what would come next. Because humanity had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. Humanity had not yet learned to give up hope. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with anxious conversations for 3 days following the human arrival. Representatives from 47 species debated what to do with this naive offer. Most thought it was foolish. Some thought it was brave. A few thought it might be their last chance. In the end, they agreed to let the humans try. Not because they believed it would work, but because both empires had announced plans for a massive offensive. Intelligence suggested millions would die in the coming months. If the humans could buy even a little time, it might allow for evacuations. It was a small hope, but it was something. Captain Chen received the news with quiet satisfaction. Her team gathered in their small quarters aboard Concordia Prime. There were 12 of them in total: scientists, diplomats, a historian, a psychologist, 2 doctors, and 3 military advisors who had volunteered to leave their weapons behind. "We have permission to approach both empires," Chen told them, "but we need to understand them first. We cannot negotiate peace between enemies we do not know." Dr. James Park, the team psychologist, leaned forward. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. "The data we have received is troubling. The Castheric are a hive mind. Individual identity does not exist for them. How do we negotiate with a species that has no concept of individual desires? And the Vrin are energy beings," added Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their physicist. "They experience reality in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Their language barely translates. How do we communicate with something so alien?" Chen nodded. "That is exactly why we need to meet them. Not as negotiators yet, but as students. We will go to them humbly. We will ask to learn about their cultures, their histories, their values. We will listen." Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, one of the military advisors, frowned. "Captain, with respect, these empires have been trying to destroy each other for 10,000 years. What makes you think they will waste time teaching us anything?" "Because," Chen said quietly, "when was the last time anyone asked them about anything other than war?" The next morning, the human delegation split into 2 groups. Chen herself would lead the mission to the Castheric Dominion. Dr. Park would lead the other team to the Vrin Collective. It was dangerous. Both empires could simply destroy them. But they had to try. Chen's ship approached the Castheric core, whirled slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions on all channels. The space around the planet was thick with military vessels, thousands of them all moving in perfect coordination. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like watching a swarm of locusts. A Castheric cruiser intercepted them. Its hull was organic, covered in a chitinous armor that looked grown rather than built. A voice echoed through their communication systems, speaking in perfect unison as if 1,000 throats formed the words together. "Humans, you have been granted audience with a sub-queen of the Dominion. You will follow our guidance. Any deviation will result in immediate termination." They followed. The Castheric homeworld was nothing like Earth. The sky was a sickly green. The architecture was all curves and tunnels, everything connected like a massive ant colony. Billions of Castheric moved through these structures, each one a part of the greater whole. They were brought before Sub-Queen Ixthal. She was enormous, her body bloated with eggs that pulsed beneath her translucent skin. Around her, hundreds of warrior forms and worker forms attended to her every need. They moved without speaking, without any visible signals, all part of the same consciousness. "Humans," the Sub-Queen said, her voice echoing through all her workers simultaneously. "You are the first outsiders to visit our world in 3,000 years. Explain your purpose before we consume you." Chen bowed respectfully. "We have come to learn. Your civilization has existed for millions of years. Surely there is more to the Castheric than war. We wish to understand your culture, your history, the things that matter to you beyond the conflict." Silence. Then, something unexpected. The Sub-Queen tilted her massive head. "Culture? No one has asked about our culture in living memory. Why would you care?" "Because you are more than your weapons," Chen said simply. Every species has dreams, has values, has a reason for existing beyond survival. We want to understand yours." The sub-queen considered this. Through her, the entire hive considered it. Finally, she spoke again. "Very well. You will be shown. But you will not understand. You are individuals. You cannot comprehend true unity." Over the following weeks, the humans were given an unprecedented look into Castheric life. They discovered that before the war, the Castheric had been artists. They had created vast living sculptures, plants, and animals bred into impossible shapes. They had composed music through the coordinated movements of millions. They had built libraries of genetic memory, storing knowledge in the very DNA of their species. All of this had been abandoned for the war effort. The art forms had been converted to warrior forms. The living sculptures had been weaponized. The genetic libraries had become military databases. Dr. Maria Santos, their anthropologist, recorded everything. She found ancient Castheric poetry, stored in forgotten archives. She discovered that they had once explored the galaxy not as conquerors, but as students of life itself. They had documented thousands of extinct species, preserved their beauty for memory alone. "Why did you stop?" Chen asked the sub-queen one day. "The war demanded everything," came the reply. "Art is luxury. War is necessity." Meanwhile, Dr. Park's team faced different challenges with the Vryn. The Vryn did not have worlds in the traditional sense. They existed in nebulas and energy fields. Their consciousness spread across light years of space. Communicating with them was like trying to speak to a storm. But slowly, they found ways to connect. The Vryn were fascinated by human music. Sound was something they could perceive even in energy form. When Dr. Lisa Wang, their cultural specialist, played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Vryn coalesced around the ship, drinking in the vibrations. Beautiful. Luminary essence of void pulsed. Your species creates patterns in air. For no survival purpose. For joy, Wang explained. For expressing emotion. For connecting with each other. Emotion, the luminary echoed. The Castheric have no emotion, only purpose. This is why they must be opposed. "But you have emotion," Park said carefully. "I can sense it in how you speak. There is anger there. And pain." The luminary flashed bright, almost blinding them. Then it dimmed. "Yes, we feel. But feelings have been weaponized, like everything else. Our joy is in victory. Our sorrow is in loss. There is no space for anything that does not serve the war." Park's team discovered that the Vryn had once been philosophers and explorers of consciousness itself. They had studied the nature of thought, of existence, of the fundamental forces that bind the universe. Their ancient texts spoke of harmony, of understanding, of the interconnection of all things. The war had corrupted this too. Their philosophy had become ideology. Their exploration of consciousness had turned into psychological warfare. Their understanding of the universe had been reduced to finding better ways to destroy their enemies. As the months passed, both human teams sent their findings back to Concordia Prime. Chen and Park compiled their reports together, sitting in the quiet of the human quarters late into the night. "They have forgotten who they are," Chen said quietly, reviewing the data. Both of them. They were not always warriors. They had rich cultures, beautiful traditions, meaningful purposes beyond killing each other. Park nodded. The war has become their identity. They literally do not know how to exist without it. To stop fighting would mean confronting the emptiness of what they have become. "So we remind them," Chen said. "We show them what they have lost. We help them remember." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked skeptical. "With respect, Captain. How do you remind someone of something they have spent 10,000 years trying to forget?" Chen smiled, and there was something both sad and hopeful in that expression. "The same way we do anything difficult, one small step at a time. We start by showing them that we see more than warriors when we look at them. We see people. We see civilizations worth saving." The human delegation began their work in earnest. They requested permission to help repair war-damaged infrastructure in the neutral zones. Both empires refused at first, suspicious of ulterior motives. But the humans were persistent. "We are not soldiers," Chen broadcast on open channels. "We are engineers, doctors, teachers. Let us help rebuild what has been destroyed. Let us show you what humans do best. We fix things. We heal things. We bring things back to life." Eventually, the council convinced both empires to allow limited humanitarian missions. It was seen as a useful test. If the humans died trying to help, it would prove their foolishness. If they succeeded, perhaps they could be useful in other ways. The first mission was to a neutral world that had been caught in crossfire. Its cities were ruins. Its people were starving. Both empires had moved on, leaving the wounded to die. This was not cruelty exactly. It was simply that the war consumed all attention. There was no energy left for mercy. The humans arrived with medical supplies, food, and construction equipment. They worked alongside the locals, refusing any special treatment. When Castheric soldiers passed through on patrol, they found human doctors treating Castheric wounded left behind in the retreat. 6 months into the human mediation effort, something unexpected happened. Something small, almost insignificant, but which would echo across the galaxy. A human musician named David Kim had joined one of the humanitarian missions. He was not a diplomat or a doctor. He was simply a violinist who had volunteered because he believed music could help heal trauma. The council had been skeptical but allowed it. Kim found himself on a Vrin-aligned world that had been bombed repeatedly. The local population, a species of methane breathers called the Thalocs, lived in sealed domes. Half their cities were destroyed. Food was scarce. Many had lost family members. In the evenings, after helping with reconstruction, Kim would sit in the damaged central square and play his violin. He played human music at first. Bach, Mozart, traditional folk songs from Korea. The Thalocs would gather to listen, finding comfort in the strange sounds from an alien world. One day, an old Thalocs approached him. Through the translation device, her voice was thin and tired. "Can you play our songs? The ones we sang before the war? Most of our musicians are dead. I would like to hear them again before I die." Kim asked her to hum the melodies. She did, her voice cracking with age and grief. Kim listened carefully, then slowly picked out the notes on his violin. The sound was rough at first, imperfect, but as he played, more Thalocs gathered. They began to sing along, remembering words they thought they had forgotten. A Vrin observer, a young essence barely old enough to hold form, watched from above. It had been assigned to monitor the human activities for potential threats. But as it listened to the music, something stirred within its consciousness. The songs carried emotions, memory, loss, love. Things the Vrin had been taught to weaponize, now expressed in their purest form. The young Vrin had never heard music like this. Music that existed only to express feeling, not to manipulate or control. It was beautiful in a way that weapons could never be. The Vrin returned to its collective and shared the experience. The memory rippled through the energy networks. Millions of Vrin felt it simultaneously. Most dismissed it as irrelevant. But some, like Luminary Essence of Void, paused to consider it. When had the Vrin last created something beautiful for its own sake? Meanwhile, in Castheric space, another breakthrough occurred. Dr. Maria Santos had been working with a group of Castheric scholar forms. These were rare individuals within the hive, specialized for research and memory. They maintained the genetic archives, the collective knowledge of the species. Santos asked them about Castheric history before the war. What had they valued? What had they created? The scholar forms were hesitant at first, but Santos was patient. She shared human history in return, telling them about Earth's own dark periods and eventual recovery. Slowly, the scholars began to open the ancient archives. They showed Santos images of living sculptures, vast biological artworks that had once dotted the Castheric homeworld. Gardens that sang in the wind. Creatures bred not for war but for beauty, their forms impossible and stunning. This was all destroyed? Santos asked quietly. Converted, the scholars replied through their unified voice. The resources were needed for the war. The art forms became weapon forms. The gardens became troop staging grounds. Nothing was destroyed. It was transformed, but do you miss it? Santos pressed. The question hung in the air. In the hive mind, it propagated to millions of Castheric. Did they miss beauty? Did they miss creation that served no purpose but joy? For the first time in thousands of years, the hive was divided in its answer. Some said no. Purpose was all that mattered. The war was the only meaning. But others, a small but growing number, whispered yes. They missed it. They had not known they missed it until asked. But the absence was there, a hollow space in their collective soul. Captain Chen received these reports with careful optimism. The humans were making connections, opening doors that had been sealed for millennia. But they were also running out of time. Intelligence from the Council indicated both empires were preparing for their largest offensive yet. Fleets were massing, superweapons were being moved into position. The neutral zones would become killing fields. Billions would die. Chen called a meeting of all human personnel. They gathered in the main conference room, faces tired but determined. "We have made progress," Chen began. "We have reminded both sides of who they were. We have shown them kindness they had forgotten. We have planted seeds of doubt about the necessity of this war. But seeds take time to grow, and time is something we do not have." "What are you proposing?" asked Dr. Park. "We need to give them proof," Chen said. "Not just words or small acts of kindness. We need to show them concrete evidence of what they have become and what they could be again. We need to make them confront the truth they have been avoiding for 10,000 years. Lieutenant Rodriguez leaned forward. "How do you make someone see a truth they do not want to see?" Chen pulled up a holographic display. It showed the war's timeline, stretched across millennia. Billions of deaths, hundreds of destroyed worlds, resources consumed, lives wasted. And at the very beginning, barely visible in the ancient past, was the original conflict. "Our historians have been working with Council archives," Chen explained. "We found the beginning, the actual start of this war. Do you know what it was about?" The room was silent. "A planet," Chen said quietly. "A single planet in what is now dead space. Both empires claimed it had religious significance. Both sent colonists. There was a dispute about territory, a skirmish, deaths on both sides, then retaliation, then escalation." She zoomed in on the timeline. Within 100 years, the planet was destroyed in the fighting. "It has been gone for 9,900 years. They are still fighting over a world that no longer exists." Dr. Santos gasped. "They do not know this?" "They have forgotten," Chen replied. "Or perhaps they never knew." The war became bigger than its origins. It became about honor, about survival, about identity. The original reason was lost. But it is there in the archives waiting to be found. "We need to show them this," Dr. Park said. "Both sides simultaneously. They need to see that they have been dying for a ghost." Chen nodded. "But it is not enough to just tell them. They have to discover it themselves. We need to guide them to the truth without forcing it. If it comes from us, they will reject it. If it comes from their own archives, from their own historians, they cannot deny it." Over the next weeks, the human teams worked carefully. They helped Castheric scholars access damaged archives. They assisted Vryn memory keepers in reconstructing ancient records. They asked innocent questions that led to deeper investigations. "What was the planet's name?" Santos asked a Castheric scholar. "The one where the conflict began?" The scholar did not know. The information was too old. But the question sparked curiosity. The scholars began to search. In Vryn space, Dr. Wang asked similar questions. "Why did your ancestors consider the conflict worth fighting? What made that place special?" The Vryn did not remember. But they began to look. The truth began to emerge like a whale surfacing from dark water. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Castheric scholars found references to a world called Talshar. Vryn memory keepers recovered data about a sacred nexus point. They were the same place. Both empires began investigating independently, each believing they were uncovering vital strategic intelligence. Neither realized they were being gently guided toward the same conclusion. The revelation came almost simultaneously. Castheric scholars presented their findings to Sub-Queen Ixthal. Vryn memory keepers brought their discoveries to Luminary Essence of Void. The war began over Talshar. Talshar was destroyed in year 112 of the conflict. They had been fighting for 9,888 years over empty space. The response from both empires was immediate and visceral. Denial. The data must be wrong. The archives corrupted. This could not be true, but the evidence was irrefutable. Multiple sources, cross-referenced, verified. The truth was undeniable. In the Castheric hive, the revelation spread like poison. Trillions of deaths, entire generations bred for war, civilizations consumed, all for something that had ceased to exist before most living Castheric were even born. The hive mind reeled. For the first time in recorded history, there was chaos in the unity. Some wanted to suppress the information. Others demanded answers. Still others simply felt the weight of meaningless sacrifice. In Vryn space, the reaction was different but equally profound. Beings of energy do not cry, but something like grief rippled through their collective consciousness. They had believed their cause was righteous, their sacrifice meaningful. Now they faced the possibility that it had all been for nothing. Luminary Essence of Void confronted Dr. Wang. "Did you know? Is this why you came?" Wang met the luminary's gaze without flinching. "We discovered it in the archives, but we could not tell you. You would not have believed us. You needed to find it yourselves." "You manipulated us," the luminary accused. "We showed you the truth," Wang replied quietly. "What you do with it is your choice." Both empires now faced an impossible question. If the original reason for the war was gone, what were they fighting for? Pride, habit? Because stopping would mean admitting the deaths had been meaningless? In the neutral zones, the planned offensive stalled. Orders went out, then were countermanded. Fleet commanders received conflicting instructions. The message went out across all channels, public and encrypted, to every species in the galaxy. Captain Chen spoke clearly and without hesitation. "To all who can hear this, humanity invites you to join us in creating something that has not existed in this galaxy for 10,000 years. A monument to peace, not a memorial to the dead, though we will honor them. Not a treaty, though we hope for that too. But something simpler and more powerful. A work of art. A reminder that we are more than our weapons, that we can create as well as destroy." The response was mixed. Many dismissed it as naive. Others were curious. But then Chen added something that changed everything. "We will build this monument in the space where Talshar once existed, the place where this war began. We will fill that empty space with beauty instead of battles, and we invite the Castheric Dominion and the Vryn Collective to help us, to show the galaxy who you truly are beyond the warriors you have become." It was audacious. Some called it insulting, but it was also irresistible. The challenge was clear. Could these ancient empires create anything besides weapons? To everyone's surprise, both empires agreed. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the need to prove themselves. Or perhaps deep down, some part of them wanted to remember what it felt like to build instead of destroy. Ships began arriving at the coordinates of the dead world. Human vessels came first, small and fragile compared to the warships that followed. Then Castheric cruisers, their organic hulls pulsing with nervous energy. Finally, Vryn energy forms coalesced from the nearby nebula, shimmering with uncertainty. The neutral species watched nervously. This many military vessels in one place could trigger catastrophe. One wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, and the war would explode with unprecedented violence. But the humans had planned carefully. They began by sharing their vision, not dictating but suggesting. The monument would be a garden, a vast space garden, using the debris field that remained from Talshar's destruction. Asteroids would be shaped and planted. Energy fields would create growing zones. Art from all species would be displayed. It would be a living memorial. The Castheric scholar forms were invited to design biological elements. They hesitated at first, confused. They had not designed for beauty in thousands of years, but with human encouragement, old genetic memories surfaced. They began to sketch plans for living sculptures, plants that would grow in the void fed by stellar radiation. The Vryn were asked to create energy patterns, light displays that would dance through the garden. Again, uncertainty. Their powers had been weapons for so long. But slowly, carefully, they began to experiment. Colors that did not burn. Patterns that pleased rather than destroyed. Work began. It was awkward at first. Castheric and Vryn worked in separate sections, avoiding each other. Humans moved between them, carrying messages, offering suggestions, slowly building bridges. Other species began to arrive, wanting to contribute. The neutral races brought their own art, their own memories of what had been lost to the war. Days turned to weeks. Something remarkable began to happen. Castheric worker forms and human engineers started coordinating their efforts. They found they could communicate through mathematics, through the universal language of structure and design. The Castheric learned to appreciate human intuition. The humans learned from Castheric precision. Vryn energy weavers and human artists discovered they could collaborate on light sculptures. The Vryn could create forms impossible for solid beings. The humans could imagine patterns the Vryn had never considered. Together they made beauty neither could achieve alone. Then something unprecedented occurred. A young Castheric worker form, curious and newly awakened to individual thought, approached a Vryn essence. It was the first direct, peaceful interaction between the two species in living memory. The Castheric gestured to a section of garden it had been designing. Through translation software, it asked if the Vryn could add light patterns to complement the biological forms. The Vryn hesitated. This was the enemy. This was what it had been taught to destroy. But here, in this place of creation, that teaching seemed hollow. The Vryn looked at the garden design. It was beautiful. It deserved light. Together they worked. The Castheric shaped living vines that spiraled through space. The Vryn wove light through them, making them glow with colors that shifted like dawn. When they finished, both stood back and looked at what they had made. It was only a small section of the garden, but it was theirs. Created together, the enemy working in harmony. News of this collaboration spread rapidly. More Castheric and Vryn began to interact, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. They discovered they could work together, that the enemy was not so different. That creation was more satisfying than destruction. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. In both empires, hardline factions watched with growing alarm. This peace movement threatened everything they believed in. The war was their purpose, their identity. Without it, they were nothing. These extremists could not allow this to continue. They formed an alliance in secret. Castheric military commanders and Vryn war minds who refused to accept peace. They would prove that the war must continue. They would show that the two species could never coexist. They planned a false flag attack. A neutral world would be destroyed, and evidence would be planted to make each empire believe the other was responsible. The peace movement would collapse. The war would resume with even greater intensity. The target was chosen carefully. A heavily populated world in the neutral zone, 4 billion inhabitants, a mix of species. Its destruction would be a tragedy too large to ignore, an atrocity that would demand retaliation. The conspiracy moved in shadows, using encrypted channels and old network protocols. They assembled fleets in secret. They prepared weapons of devastating power. Everything was ready, but they had not counted on one thing. The Castheric hive was no longer as unified as it once was. Individual thoughts had begun to emerge, and one scholar form, who had been working with humans on the Garden Project, noticed the strange fleet movements. She reported it to Sub-Queen Ixthal. At the same time, a young Vryn essence who had learned to appreciate music discovered the conspiracy through monitoring energy patterns. It reported to Luminary Essence of Void. Both leaders faced the same terrible choice: stop their own extremists and reveal internal division, or allow the attack and resume the war. Captain Chen learned of the plot through Council intelligence. She immediately contacted both Empire leaders. "You must stop them, both of you. If this attack happens, everything we have built will be destroyed. The galaxy will burn for another 10,000 years. If we stop them, we show weakness," Ixthal replied. "The hive may fracture further. If we act against our own, we prove the humans right," Essence of Void added, "that we are more than war." Chen's response was simple and devastating. "If you do nothing, then you are exactly what the extremists say you are. Creatures of war who cannot change. But if you act, if you choose peace even when it is difficult, then you prove you are something greater. You prove you are worth saving." Both leaders made their decisions independently, but arrived at the same conclusion. They sent loyal forces to intercept the conspirators, but they were not fast enough. The extremist fleets had already launched toward the target world. The neutral world's defenses were minimal. They had no chance of survival. Evacuation was impossible. 4 billion people waited helplessly as massive fleets approached from both directions. Then humanity made its choice. Earth's entire fleet, all 300 ships, jumped to the neutral world. They were hopelessly outnumbered. The extremist forces numbered in the thousands. But the humans did not come to fight. They came to shield. The human ships positioned themselves between the approaching fleets and the planet. Captain Chen broadcast on all frequencies, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. "To the forces approaching this world, You want to continue killing. You want to prove that peace is impossible. You may be right. But if you attack this planet, you will have to go through us first. You will have to destroy humanity to prove your point. Is that what you want? To be remembered as the ones who exterminated a species that only ever tried to help you? Silence fell across space. The galaxy watched, holding its breath. 300 human ships against thousands. It was suicide, but Chen was not done. The human ships began broadcasting something else. Voices. Stories. The humans had collected testimonies over the past months. Castheric workers speaking about rediscovering art. Vrin essences describing the joy of creating light patterns. Soldiers from both sides who had begun to question the war. These were not enemy voices. They were voices of people who had started to hope. Who had remembered they were more than weapons. Who wanted a chance to live for something other than death. The extremist commanders ordered the attack. Fire on the humans. Destroy them and complete the mission. But their crews hesitated. These were the beings who had saved their wounded. Who had taught them music. Who had shown them old memories of beauty. A Castheric subcommander, one who had participated in the Garden Project, refused the order. It transmitted its refusal through the hive. Other Castheric began to echo the refusal. The unified command structure fractured. In the Vrin fleet, a Warsphere commander remembered the human musicians who had performed for its Essence Choir. It could not destroy those who had. The formal peace talks took 3 years. That might seem like a long time. But for civilizations that had been at war for 10,000 years, it was merely a heartbeat. The negotiations were held at Concordia Prime, with humanity mediating. Captain Chen had aged noticeably during those years. The weight of responsibility had marked her face with new lines, but her eyes remained bright with determination. The talks were difficult. 10,000 years of hatred did not dissolve overnight. There were arguments, accusations, moments when the whole process seemed ready to collapse. Both empires struggled with the concept of compromise. They had forgotten how to see each other as anything other than enemies, but the humans were patient. When tempers flared, they called for breaks. When old wounds were reopened, they reminded everyone of the garden at Tal Shar, where former enemies had created beauty together. When progress stalled, they brought in artists and musicians and ordinary citizens who had begun to imagine a different future. Slowly, section by section, the treaty took shape. It was not perfect. No treaty ever is, but it was honest. It acknowledged the wrongs on both sides. It established boundaries and trade agreements. It created mechanisms for resolving disputes without violence. Most importantly, it recognized that the war had been a tragedy that served no one. The day the treaty was signed, representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered at Concordia Prime. Hive Queen Zaxthar attended in person, her massive form filling the ceremonial chamber. Luminary Essence of Void coalesced nearby, its energy form pulsing with carefully controlled emotion. Ambassador Thelen, who had seen so many peace talks fail, could barely believe he was witnessing this moment. His forearms trembled as he prepared to speak. Today, he said, his voice thick with emotion, we witness the impossible. After 10,000 years, the endless war has ended. Not because one side defeated the other, not because resources were exhausted, but because we chose to stop. Because we remembered that there is more to existence than conflict. He turned to the human delegation. We owe this moment to humanity, a young species barely into space who refused to accept that peace was impossible, who showed us that kindness is not weakness, who reminded us of who we used to be and who we could be again. The treaty was signed, not with weapons or threats, but with hope. The galaxy watched as former enemies became partners in an uncertain peace. The transition was not easy. Both empires had to completely restructure their societies. The Castheric had to learn to function with increasing individuality. The hive mind did not disappear, but it changed. Individual Castheric began to have their own thoughts, their own desires, while still maintaining connection to the collective. It was painful and confusing, but also liberating. The Vrin faced their own challenges. For so long, their existence had been defined by opposition to the Castheric. Now they had to find new purpose. They returned to their ancient philosophies, to the study of consciousness and reality. But this time, they invited other species to join them, creating the first multi-species academy of thought in galactic history. The war machines were converted. Factories that had produced weapons for millennia began making tools for construction. Warships were retrofitted as cargo vessels and exploration craft. It was symbolic as much as practical. The galaxy was choosing to build instead of destroy. The neutral species, no longer caught between titans, emerged from their fear. They contributed their own cultures and innovations to the growing galactic community. Worlds that had been battlefields became centers of learning and trade. The scars of war would take generations to heal, but healing had finally begun. The garden at Tal Shar became the symbol of the new era. It grew steadily, tended by volunteers from dozens of species. What had begun as a monument evolved into something greater. It became a living library of galactic culture, a place where art from all civilizations was displayed and celebrated. Scientists studied the unique ecosystem created by combining castheric biological engineering with Vrin energy manipulation. Poets wrote about its beauty. Children from across the galaxy came to see where peace had been born. Humanity's role in galactic affairs grew, but not in the way anyone expected. Earth did not become a military power or an economic giant. Humans remained relatively small in numbers and influence, but they became something else. They became the conscience of the galaxy. When disputes arose between species, they asked for human mediators. When new civilizations entered the galactic stage, humans were sent to welcome them. When anyone forgot why peace mattered, they visited Earth to learn about a species that had nearly destroyed itself with war, but chose differently. Earth itself became a pilgrimage site. Beings from across the galaxy came to see the blue planet that had produced such stubborn hope. They studied human history with all its failures and triumphs. They learned about the countless times humanity had fought itself, and the countless times it had made peace. They tried to understand what made these fragile creatures believe that impossible things could be achieved. The answer was never simple. It was something about human nature, about the ability to imagine a better future even in the darkest times, about the refusal to accept that things had to stay as they were, about the foolish, beautiful belief that one person could make a difference. Captain Sarah Chen eventually retired from active service. She returned to Earth, to a small house by the ocean where she could finally rest. But rest proved elusive. Too many beings from too many worlds wanted to meet her, to thank her, to understand how she had done the impossible. She always gave them the same answer. I did not end the war. The people who were fighting ended it. I just asked them questions they had stopped asking themselves. Why are you fighting? What are you fighting for? Who do you want to be? On the 50th anniversary of the peace treaty, a special ceremony was held at the garden. Chen was there, now elderly but still sharp-minded. So was Ambassador Theln, impossibly old even for his long-lived species. Representatives from both the Castheric and Vrin came, including some who had been part of the original extremist conspiracy and had since reformed. A monument was unveiled at the center of the garden. It was a human ship carefully preserved, not a warship but the small diplomatic vessel that had first brought humanity to Concordia Prime. Its hull bore scars from when it had positioned itself as a shield between attacking fleets in a helpless world. The ship had a name engraved on its bow in multiple languages: Compassion's Shield. Hive Queen Zaxthar, now ancient beyond measure, spoke through her worker forms. We built this monument to honor those who refused to accept our violence. The humans could have stayed hidden. They could have let us destroy ourselves. Instead, they came to us and said that we were worth saving, even when we did not believe it ourselves. Luminary essence of void, its energy form dimmed with age but still brilliant, added its own words. We were lost in the darkness of endless conflict. We had forgotten there was any other way to exist. The humans brought light, not through force but through the simple act of caring about beings they had just met. This changed everything. Chen was asked to speak. She stood before the gathered multitudes, looking out at thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds. Once this sight would have terrified her. Now it filled her with quiet joy. 50 years ago, she began, I stood in the council chambers and asked a simple question. Why are you fighting? No one could answer. They had forgotten. The war had become everything, consuming the past and the future. All that remained was an eternal present of violence. She paused, looking at the ship behind her. We didn't end your war with superior weapons or ancient wisdom. We ended it by refusing to accept that it had to continue. Sometimes the most human thing you can do is care when it seems illogical to do so, to hope when hope appears foolish, to offer kindness to those who might destroy you. You taught us something too. You taught us that no one is beyond redemption, that civilizations that have forgotten how to be peaceful can remember. That change is always possible, no matter how impossible it seems. She smiled and her eyes shone with tears. This garden exists because people chose differently. Because you chose differently. And every day that choice continues, peace grows stronger. The war is over, but the work of peace never ends. We must tend it like this garden, carefully and constantly. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Then another. Then thousands. The sound mixing with clicks, chimes, and energy pulses as different species showed their approval. After the ceremony, Chen walked through the garden alone. She stopped at a section where castoric vines grew intertwined with Vrin light patterns. It was the first collaboration, the one made by a young worker form and a curious essence who dared to work together. Both of them were there now, tending their creation. The castoric had become a respected bioengineer. The Vrin was a renowned artist. They had remained friends across the years, an unlikely pairing that symbolized the new galaxy. They noticed Chen and approached respectfully. "Thank you," the castoric said through its translator. "For everything." Chen shook her head.